Hello everyone, welcome to Like and Hood Reads. My name's Michaela and I'm coming at you with an anticipated releases video for 2023. Now originally my anticipated releases, there were 28 of them that I wrote down initially. I have to say I got a little carried away, especially since I'm not supposed to be focusing on new releases next year. However, I managed to narrow that list down to just 13, and these are the 13 that are specifically adult science fiction fantasy and that I know or suspect to be queer or have queer characters. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First up is going to be The Daughters of Izdihar, and that is a new book by a debut author set in an Egyptian-inspired fantasy world. This book is supposed to be the first in a new duology from this author, and it is about two sapphic characters, a bookshop keeper, or, she works in a bookstore, so I'm all for that. Sapphic in a bookstore sounds great. My understanding is that there are also going to be a lot of sort of suffragette sort of stuff, women's rights sort of stuff within this fantasy world. I think that's kind of what brings them together, is they're fighting for women's rights. I don't know, the cover looks great. It's Egyptian inspired, which is exciting. And I'm pretty much here for any and all sapphic fantasies, so this one had to be on the list. All these release dates that I have are going to be a little tentative. I did my best to make sure they were the most recent information. And for that one, the release date I have as January 10th. Next, for February, I have World Running Down. Now, this is a sort of near-future, post-apocalyptic, dystopian book that I understand has a lot to do with AI. In fact, I believe one of the main characters, possibly the love interest, is an AI, so what I'm hearing is robot romance, and I'm totally here for that. The POV character is supposed to be a trans man, I believe, or at least a non-binary man. I'm not really sure, but I know that a lot of their story has to do with working towards the goal of getting somewhere safe in this post-apocalyptic world, and also getting somewhere that has the sort of technology and medicine they need to fully transition. So maybe we're talking about a trans man then. Next, coming up in February, is going to be World Running Down. I've been following this author and this book's progress sort of on Twitter, watching them get super hyped for the release. And my understanding is that this book takes place in a very near future, post-apocalyptic kind of dystopian world, in which a trans man is searching for a safe place to transition even after the apocalypse. And my understanding is that that's the POV character, but at some point there's also going to be a love interest or a secondary character in the form of a former AI, a robot, a cyborg, I'm not really sure. Some sort of artificial intelligence, and that these two meet up and maybe sparks fly, I'm not really sure. But I am excited to see that there might be some sort of robot AI romance going on. I definitely want more of that. You also have the sort of male-male element, even if you're looking at the robot as possibly being a non-binary character. In general, I'm just very excited about this one. It looks interesting, and it's been a while since I've actually enjoyed something kind of post-apocalyptic or dystopian, so I'm definitely eager to check it out. World Running Down comes out on Valentine's Day. That's going to be February 14th. Next is going to be A Day of Fallen Night, and that is by Samantha Shannon. This is, of course, the highly anticipated prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. And while this book I don't think is very connected to that one, my understanding is it takes place significantly before the events of Priory of the Orange Tree, possibly hundreds of years before, if I'm understanding correctly. It does take place within the same world. So you can either read this as a standalone or as a highly anticipated follow-up to the amazing world that Shannon was able to produce in Priory of an Orange Tree. This book, I don't know much about the plot, but I didn't really need to know more than it was the same world as Priory of an Orange Tree. I loved that book back in 2019 when I first read it. It was a big part of me getting excited about reading again post-college, and about getting excited about fantasy, about women in fantasy, and about queer fantasy. Especially this book just set me off, and I'm so grateful not only to the author, of course, but just to all the women authors who have followed up, books like this. And I'm just super excited to see that Shannon is returning to that world, because it was so vast and so rich and so beautiful. And even though Priory of an Orange Tree is a thick one. There wasn't nearly enough of the world and nearly enough of the characters for me to be satisfied after that, so the idea of a prequel, a sequel, a companion novel, anything at all, I would have taken whatever Shannon had to give, because I'm so excited about A Day of Fallen Night. Of course, the cover is stunning, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. I tried to get an ARC, but was rejected, of course, so I will just have to wait, and, you know, sometimes the anticipation makes it better. We do have that one coming out on February 28th of 2023. Pretty much you've got dragons, hopefully lesbians, I think, pirates, magic, wizards, witches, I don't know. Shannon could do anything, really, anything. Next is going to be Emperor of Ruin, coming out on February 28th as well. Not to be mistaken with The Empire's Ruin or The Emperor's Ruin. This is Emperor of Ruin by Django Wexler. It's going to be the third book in their, let's see, Burningblade and Silvereye trilogy. I think it's a trilogy series. I'm not sure. It's the next book, and I'm very excited. I blew through the first two books at the end of last year. I fell absolutely in love with Django's writing style, and especially the way that he handles female characters, sapphic characters. I'm loving it. I'm in the middle of reading Shadow Campaigns now. Actually, I'm on the last book of his Shadow Campaigns series, and I'm very excited to see the next book in Burningblade and Silvereye, because that's the series I've enjoyed most so far, and I can't wait to see what happens next. It's about a brother and a sister who are on opposite sides of this sort of ideological war. One of them is a part of this organization that gives her sort of abilities and Jedi-like power and status within the world, but there are hints that this this organization she's a part of might be a little bit corrupt, whereas her brother is more of a rebel. He's kind of grown up on the streets, scraping and fighting for every little bit of respect that he can get. And of course this sends them on a collision course after they haven't seen each other in a very long time, since they were children. And that's kind of where the series kicks off, and we're on the third book now, and I have to say I love it more and more each book. You have the sister, so one of the POV characters is a lesbian, and she is in a sapphic relationship throughout pretty much the entire series, so far at least, and the second book, it really ended on a cliffhanger. So I'm very excited for this third book. I've got February 28th is the release date, and let me hope that that doesn't get delayed. Next on my list is from the author of City of Brass and that whole David Bob's trilogy, or duology, I don't know, I haven't read those yet. Anyway, she's got a new book coming out, and that is going to be The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. This is the first book in a new trilogy from this author, and it's supposed to be all about ancient mysteries and piracy and sorcerers and magic, and about defining your own legend. So I'm super excited about this one. You really kind of had me at this cover and pirates, and I've been meaning to read this author's work anyway. I've been trying to get to City of Brass for what feels like years, and it's just like never the right time. But I do want to read this one, even if it has to happen before City of Brass. I'm just super interested to see, you know, what the fuss is all about. And I mean, queer elements, female pirates, pirates in general. I'm there for it. I'm excited. That comes out on March 2nd of 2023. Next is going to be a sequel, and that is the sequel to The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke, The Faithless. Comes out on March 7th, and that is going to be, I'm so excited. So I really enjoyed The Unbroken last year. It was part of the Sapphic Trifecta. It's a pretty heavy military fantasy, mostly dealing with issues of like colonialism, oppression, the use of a country or a nation or a culture's own people that are being used like and turned against it in this really poisonous, just traumatic way that totally puts them apart from their culture, and just it's so good. But it's also sapphic. So we've got this soldier who has been thrown into the middle of this big political mess when they are asked to help tame down a war in their country of origin for the country that kidnapped them when they were kids and has used them as just pretty much child soldiers all their lives. And now they're being asked to subjugate their own people, and there's a lot of conflict there, and it's also involved the love interest is the princess of this, or the sort of empress of the oppressive nation, who is trying to make things better, but is she really, or is she doing more harm than good? And there's just so much good conflict in this book. In the series is called Magic of the Lost, and while I really enjoyed the first book, I honestly have no idea where the second book is going to go, except that I'm there for it. Like, I'm very interested in this world. There were some hints that the second book was going to get more into the sort of magic system, the lost magic of this world. And so I think things are only going to get more fantastical as we go along. The first book was very military fantasy heavy, which is not a complaint. I really enjoyed it. But I think things are going to get more fantastical and sort of more uncovering, you know, the mysteries of this culture, of this land, of this nation, kind of uncovering lost histories and things like that in the second book. So I'm excited to jump into that. I thought that we would get this sequel this year, mostly because the Jasmine Thrones sequel came out this year, but alas, sometimes longer means you're going to get a better product. Not always. And that comes out on March 7th. And then for April, we have Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh, and you may remember Emily Tesh is the author of the Green Hollow Duology, Silver in the Wood, and also Drowned Country, which I read earlier this year. While I really enjoyed both those novellas by Emily Tesh, I'm very excited to see what she can do with a full-length novel, though of course we're switching up the genre this time. Some Desperate Glory is a queer space opera about war, found family, subjugation, and having all your choices stripped away from you. My understanding is that the main character is queer, I think. And that she is supposed to be like some sort of badass, right? Like she's number one of the greatest warriors of her people, and they are sort of the remnants left over from the people of Earth after it was destroyed. So this is a sort of space opera where they live on like a space station in a very The Expanse sort of way is kind of what it seems like to me. And she's just like the best of the best in terms of like their soldiers and their warriors. But for whatever reason, because this society is still super sexist and misogynistic, I guess, she's relegated to just having children, even though she's one of their greatest assets. I don't know why. Hopefully the book will get more into why anyone would ever make that decision. But anyway, they try to relegate her into just being like a breeder and like having kids for the empire, I guess. And they also try to kill her brother, according to the blurb. So so they run away, of course, and she kind of like goes off and gets into a ragtag space opera gang, and is probably going to be trying to take down these people that she was originally, you know, kicking ass for. So that seems to be what we're getting into. I'm pretty excited about it. It looks like it's got a lot of found family stuff. There seem to be some aliens interacting. I love when there are aliens that we're actually friends with and working with instead of just these faceless space monsters that we're fighting. So there's a lot to look forward to from Some Desperate Glory. That comes out on April 11th, and I, for one, cannot wait. And next for May, something a little off the beaten path is going to be Our Hideous Progeny. Now, originally I thought this was a YA book, but I actually can't find where it says that anywhere, in the blurb or on the publisher page or anything like that. It's not labeled as YA, so for right now, until proven otherwise, I'm just going to go forward like it's an adult book. And this is going to be a sort of Frankenstein retelling. I don't know a whole lot of the details, just that I believe the main character is Dr. Frankenstein's niece, or at the very least a descendant of hers, who kind of picks up where her ancestor left off, and of course, that goes wrong, I'm sure, right? That's what this has got to be about. I think that the title is fantastic. I think this idea is super interesting. It's sapphic. I'm not really sure if it's going to lean more towards the sci-fi elements or more towards the horror elements, or if it's going to try to be a nice mix of both. I'm hoping for a mix of both. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to expect of this, just that I love Frankenstein. I love the story of Frankenstein. I love the themes of Frankenstein. And if you're going to make that sapphic, I'm going to read that. I'm going to check that out, for sure. And you can expect Our Hideous Progeny on May 9th. For June, we have The Archive Undying. This is going to be a sort of sci-fi hybrid. I understand that it has some sort of queer elements and that it's dealing with ancient, overpowered AIs that have sort of become gods in this particular society, or godlike figures, which, I mean, once an AI reaches a certain amount of intelligence and a certain amount of power, how does it really differ from God? And am I right? Did anyone else watch Person of Interest? So I'm pretty excited about this one. I love the cover. I didn't think that it was queer at first, but I read something that kind of led me to believe that I was incorrect and that it is in fact queer or has some queer elements. Maybe not the main character, but somewhere in there I'm expecting it to get gay. I've also been scared of AIs and the AI apocalypse since I watched Terminator as a very young child, and so I'm all over this. Bring it on. Next, in July, we've got 3 books on the list for July. Let's see, jumping right in. First, gonna be The Principle of Moments. This one definitely sounds refreshing. So what I know about it so far is that human beings left the Earth at some point and settled on a new planet, but little did they know that planet already belonged to someone else, and that someone else sort of comes back with a vengeance and pretty much enslaves the human population into sort of indentured servitude, where they're all working in factories and doing hard labor in order to work off a debt in which they will never be able to pay off. And that's where we find our main character. She is working in a factory, slaving in, day out, until she discovers that she has a sister who is being kept prisoner by the emperor of this planet, or this empire, I'm not really sure. She discovers that her sister is being held captive and sets off to rescue her no matter what the cost. On the other end, there's another POV character who is apparently a sick time traveler who's been traveling throughout space and time to find a cure for their illness. And this is a queer character who is also in love with a prince. And so those two are going to team up to sort of meet their own goals. I'm not really sure how the time traveling is going to work in with all the other stuff. It seems like there are 2 very distinct storylines at play here that are going to converge at some point, and I'm excited to see how that works. I'm also excited to see the sibling relationship that we're going to get, hopefully, if we rescue the sister. I'm interested in that queer relationship. Why is this time traveler in love with a prince? Does the prince know he's in love with him? Do they know each other? Is he from his original time? This synopsis just brings up so many questions for me. I gotta know more. I'm super excited. That one's coming out on July 6th, and the author is a woman of color. Also in July, we have Black Sails to Sunward. This is one that I just think the title is really cool. Like, it doesn't tell me anything about what's happening. It said that maybe there'll be pirates there, but either way, I read that title and I'm like, that sounds cool. So, let's see, we got queer space pirates. Like I said, they were going to be pirates, could tell. I don't know much more than that. Queer space pirates, yes, sign me up, I'm there for it. That one's coming out on July 22nd. And last for July, we have The Sun and the Void. This is going to be a Venezuelan-inspired fantasy with queer characters and queer elements. My understanding is it's got a sort of historical romance plot line to it, so come into this expecting there to be a lot of romance, a lot of historical vibes to the fantasy world, I'm guessing. But I'm really looking forward to the Venezuelan aspect of it. I don't get to read much South American fiction or books that are inspired by South American fiction even, so however you spend this, I think it's just going to be a really interesting read. Only one release in August, and that's going to be a sequel. He Who Drowns the World is the sequel to last year's She Who Became the Sun, which is of course part of the Sapphic Trifecta. I really enjoyed She Who Became the Sun. It drew me in right from the beginning with all its comparisons to like Mulan and the Son of Achilles, and even though I think those comparisons are making some big promises that the book doesn't necessarily follow through on, I think the book is really fantastic in a lot of other ways, and in some ways that relate to those. I just think that blurb got way overused, and it put a lot of pressure on this book to be something that it really wasn't. But anyway, She Who Became the Sun was excellent. It was different. It was refreshing. It was immersive. The characters were tortured and messed up. Like, I don't know. I really enjoyed the characters in that book because they're not really heroes. They're both working towards what I feel like are very selfish goals. And in the grand scheme of things, they're very small scale goals, right? Like, they're thinking about their own futures, their own legacies, and sort of their own fate is a lot of what that book's talking about. So I'm really looking forward to the sequel, hoping it might sort of expand a little bit on that secondary POV character from book 1, whose story wasn't really put front and center, at least not in the marketing for that book. And I think there's a lot to explore there, because I ended up feeling like he was not that he was a more interesting character, but I found that I was enjoying his POV, his chapters, and his like story progression just a lot more than the main character. So I'm thinking that's maybe what book 2 is going to focus on, kind of shift focus a little bit. Either way, I'm very excited. I think that title is awesome. I can't wait until we get some sort of cover, because I haven't seen one yet. And I'm just looking forward to more of these books that stem from that sapphic trifecta of 2021, because that was great. Let's keep that up. You can expect He Who Drowns the World on August 22nd. And last but not least, we of course have Alecto the Ninth. I do not have a release date for Alecto the Ninth, which is why I'm talking about it last. Alecto the Ninth is of course book 4, and possibly the final book in the Locked Tomb trilogy from Tamsin Muir. This is of course the series that started with Gideon the Ninth and has just sort of taken over a certain part of the internet by storm. You've got lesbian necromancers in space, but also so much more. Nona the Ninth came out this past year, and even though I enjoyed Nona the Ninth, it wasn't what I wanted from the third book in this series. It didn't give, at least me, having only read it once and having only read it on audiobook, I didn't feel like it gave me a lot of the answers that I was looking for. I also felt like it didn't give me a lot of the Gideon Harrow sort of content or sort of resolution that I was looking for. I want so much more Gideon and Harrow. I want answers to the questions we've been asking for 3 books now, but each book seems to just pile on more and more questions about what's going on, and I'm just looking for some answers from that, and that's what you would normally expect from a final book in a series, though Tamsin Muir is just bound and determined to do her own thing, and that's part of what I love about her. She doesn't write like she's beholden to anyone, or that she's beholden to an audience or to the fans. She just writes the story that she's here to write. She's trying to do it in the most interesting and entertaining way possible, and she usually succeeds, but we'll just have to see how this book 4 goes. I think Alecto has a lot of pressure on it to do a lot, for this series, and to like bring a lot of elements from this series together. The fact that this series has each book coming from a different perspective, and given that some of the books are just the narrative is so wacky, that I think Alecto is going to have to do a lot of work to kind of bring this together and put any form of closure on this series at all. But I'm looking forward to seeing how it's done. I'm hoping that Alecto will come out before August, but I imagine if that were the plan, we would have already gotten some sort of release date for it. But who knows? Nona was an entire surprise book that we didn't expect to get, so who knows what's going to happen next year, right? Either way, I'm looking forward to Alecto the Ninth. How could I not be? It's too interesting of a series to not pay attention to, honestly. Alright, and that's going to do it for my anticipated adult, queer, science fiction and fantasy releases of 2023. Like I said, that was only 13 out of a list that originally had 28 books on it. So if I have time, if I find time for the new year, I might come out with some more shorter anticipated releases videos for like YA stuff, or for science fiction fantasy stuff if I feel like it. We'll just have to see how it goes, but these were the ones that felt absolutely essential, and these were also the ones that I was pretty sure was queer. So that's what we've got. Thank you so much for joining me. Everyone have happy holidays, and please stay safe. Goodbye.